Ernie was a taxidermist, like his father's father, and his father's father's aunt. It was the swinging 60s. Everything was new and groovy. Ernie was old and dusty, and often wondered if he had become an exhibit in his own store. Taxidermy was out of fashion, and in these modern times he had to be resourceful. He was also deaf, robbed of his hearing by a summer camp bully. He never spoke again, and people presumed him dumb. He became withdrawn, spending his days drawing. Ernie yearned for the days when his life seemed less frozen. The only person who'd ever understood him was Nanette. She was a little Jewish girl whose parents owned the deli next door. She loved birds, and her hair smelt like cinnamon. He liked to draw her, and promised they'd get married on a gondola in Venice, eat spaghetti, and raise pigeons. Ernie's mother called her an extrovert. She was a peacock, Ernie a little grey sparrow with broken wings. On her 8th birthday, Ernie gave her a duck egg. She named it after her favourite singer, Edith. Their friendship blossomed. And at night, they sent messages via Morse code. He told her how much he liked her cinnamon-flavoured hair. She told him ways to be more brave. Be the windscreen, Ernie, not the insect. But one night, their happiness was suddenly taken away. The Germans invaded. Nanette and her family disappeared forever. The years had dribbled on, and all Ernie had to remember her by was his drawing and an ageing Edith. Life had become stale and wrinkled. The dead pigeon's arrival had triggered tender memories, and like most of his problems, he tried to numb them. Ernie's brain began to swirl, and the dead pigeon began to talk.
Is a windscreen, Ernee, not the insect.
Something inside Ernie shifted. The pigeon was right. It was time to be brave, time to give his life a dusting. In a burst of courage, he sold his store and bought a one-way ticket to Venice. The world was their oyster. Venice would be the pearl. Ernie's oyster had become a clam. They staggered out into the weirdness. It grew dark. They drifted aimlessly, looking for somewhere to stay. Eventually they gave up, taking refuge amongst some refuse. Ernie awoke to find he'd been robbed of his clothes, hat, money, and dignity. And then a man with a machete arrived. But the stranger was kind. He owned the takeaway, and his name was Tiny. He took them in and lent Ernie some clothes. Then filled their bellies with Australian deep-fried delicacies, Chico rolls, dim sims, and a mysterious black substance called Vegemite. They could stay as long as they liked. Ernie would sleep on the ping pong, Edith in one of Tiny's woks. Ernie wrote down his name. Tiny decided to translate it to something more Australian, Ernie Biscuit. After explaining their predicament, Tiny encouraged Ernie to find a job, while he minded Edith. Australia was a land of milk and honey and beer, Tiny said. Ernie would raise the cash for Venice in no time. After hours of wandering and worrying, he stumbled across some street vendors. Ernie's problems were solved. Tiny was very impressed and suggested they celebrate with beer. They boozed well into the night and got to know each other. Ernie learnt that Tiny was as lonely as he was, and often walked in the rain so no one could see him cry. At night he scoured the lonely huts, hoping to find another pea to share his pod. He encouraged Ernie to do the same. Tiny said there were plenty of Australian ladies desperate to meet a classy foreigner. They'd come flocking, like seagulls to a bag of chips. Tiny found Ernie a date, Angelina. Tiny arranged a meeting. He lent Ernie his lucky hat and tuxedo T-shirt, then doused him in cologne and sent him off to the local singles bar. Ernie was overwhelmed. Angelina was beautiful, beautiful beyond words, of which, of course, he had none to offer. She felt his presence and questioned his silence. The tension built. Ernie grew nervous and trembly and subconsciously began tapping Morse code. As Angelina was the daughter of a lighthouse keeper, to Ernie's shock and delight, she tapped back. Through the power of touch, their date began and stories unfolded. Blind since birth, Angelina was a lonely virgin who spent her days whittling wooden animals, her only friends. She was an empty notebook waiting to be written in, and her yearning for love was finally attained when a travelling ice sculptor came to town and chiselled his way into her heart. Their love was instant, but it was flawed. He was full of vices. Whiskey was his master. He was an enigma wrapped in a moustache, floating in a bottle of virility. They were to be wed. The whole town came, but he never did. She travelled the world in search of another flame, but to no avail. The sands in her hourglass were running dry, and her loneliness grew. She even began to ride roller coasters, just to feel alive. And yet, just yesterday, she had met with a clairvoyant who foresaw she only had one last chance in love. He'd be tall, handsome, and smell like the sea. Ernie was enamored. he felt the impulse to draw her portrait in braille. Her heart melted. She kissed his handsome nose as his cologne filled her nostrils. He smelled like the sea. He was the one. Love glued their splintered hearts together. They threw caution to the wind and set course for Venice. She packed her bags while Ernie went to gather Edith and farewell Tiny. She whittled while she waited. But life still had one more challenge for Ernie. Tiny's takeaway was locked and barred. Something was askew. He peeked into Tiny's upstairs room and filled with horror. Tiny was a fraud, a bald wolf in sheep's clothing. All he'd wanted from the beginning was Edith's juicy flesh. Ernie was late. Angelina's paranoia began to rise. So many men had let her down. Ernie became desperate. There was only one way in. It was time to be the windscreen, not the insect. Fortune had favoured the brave. Ernie had become the windscreen, and Angelina had found her tall, handsome man who smelt like the sea. Edith admired her new whittled leg. Their love was blind, and the silence was golden.